This illusion was discovered by Ebbinghaus. He was a German psychologist who pioneered the experimental study of memory and is known for discovering the forgetting curve and the spacing effect. Those two circles there, the orange ones in the middle, are the same size, but they look different because of their surroundings. I'll show you how to code this illusion in JavaScript and how to animate it as well. I'll teach a lot about good coding practices along the way. Maybe they'll be less confusing than the illusion by the end. Get it? Because illusions are... Oh, no.
Gonna code, debug, and have fun. Coding with Radu. Coding with Radu. Gonna prototype and design. Coding with Radu. Coding with Radu. Let's code now.
When coding, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as the editor, and in an empty folder, I will create index.html. And let's start with basic HTML syntax. First the doc type, and then the HTML opening and closing tags, and the head section. Let's put a title. Ebbinghaus, like so. And this is going to be a Canvas app. So in the body, I will declare our canvas, like so. And now we can open this index.html also in a browser to test. I'm using Google Chrome. And you can see here the title appearing. And if you right-click somewhere here in the top left corner, and select Inspect, you're going to see the canvas here inside of the developer tools. But it's not really visible on the screen unless we style it somehow. It's just transparent. So let's go here and give it a simple style. I will give it a solid border, 1 pixel in width. Save, refresh, and we can see it now on the page, but it's a bit small. I wanted to cover all this available space I have here. So I'm going to also give this element a width and a height. Here, a width of 700 and a height of 700 fits into my screen, but you can use other values if they fit better for you. Save, refresh. And this is how it looks like now. We're going to start writing JavaScript, and we need to address this canvas somehow. So I'm going to go back here and give it an ID, my canvas. And below the canvas, we begin to write our JavaScript code. Since this is a small project, I'm not going to work in separate files for this one. In the script tag, we'll need to access the canvas context to draw on the canvas, and we'll use the 2D context. And let's start by making a circle in the center of the screen. So I'm going to begin path, and then use the arc method from the canvas in the center of the screen horizontally, so the width divided by 2, and vertically, height divided by 2, we are going to draw a circle with a fixed radius, let's say 10. And I want a full circle, so it starts at 0 degrees and goes to 360 degrees, or 2 pi radians. In JavaScript, typically we work with radians, not degrees. Now let's fill this, save the file, refresh the page, and you should see a small circle there. Let's make it bigger. Maybe 50 here. Now it's better. So the current code works, but it's already a little bit cryptic and hard to understand because we don't know exactly what this is and what this is and what this is here when we look at it. Of course, we know that it's the center and the radius, but it would make more sense if we have some variable names telling that to us. or a comment, but then you add more things to the code that is already hard to understand. So having good, intuitive variable names makes a big difference. And I'll show you how to do it. We're going to define here the center X as my canvas width divided by 2, center Y as my canvas height divided by 2, and I'm going to call this inner radius, because we're going to have an outer radius as well of 50. And let's pass these to the arc method here instead of these more cryptic things. And now reading the code goes like this. We need the center X, center Y, inner radius, and then we use them inside of this arc method. So it somehow tells us what it's going to do as you're reading it. Much better than what we had before. And let's define also an outer radius now. Maybe, let's say 200. And we'll draw at the moment just a circle at this outer radius to see how it looks like. So same, the arc method on the center X, center Y, but now with the outer radius and 0 to 2 pi radians. And instead of filling it, which would cover the previous one, I just stroke this circle. So save, refresh, and now it looks like that. Next, we want to generate circles around this outer circle. And those circles will also have a radius. So we already have inner radius, outer circle radius could be a name for that, but this is also an outer circle here, and then those outer circles on the outer circle. It becomes very confusing when naming things like that. So I'm just going to call those circles on the side here petals. So this will be kind of like a flower being drawn here. It's a little strange because, well, it's not really a flower, but I think that that kind of name is more intuitive when reading this than calling it outer circle radius, because it will really be confused with outer radius. We are discussing circles all the time, right? So I'm going to call this petal radius, and let's just set it to 50 like the inner radius as before. And I'm going to show you a trick to draw these outer circles without trigonometry. We're going to go here, and we're going to set the line width to this petal radius. Save and refresh, and it's now thicker, but I actually want it to be twice as thick because I'm going to cut out from this outer thick line those circles that we need in some way. So let's double this value. It's now too thin if we want it to be the same kind of circles as this one, like this. And now we're going to use the line dash. We're going to set line dash, and let's say 10 and 10 at the moment, just to see how it works. Save and refresh. And this is how it looks like now. It's just 10 pixels long, the dash, and then 10 pixels the break between the dashes. So that's what this means, and you could play with these values if you want, like 110 will give you this. It's the 100, the length of each dash, and then 10 the spacing. Or you could do the other way around, like this. And now the dashes are very thin, but the spacing is really big. So hope you get this idea. What we'll do is we are going to set here the line cap to round. And what will happen now is that these dashes become almost circles. They actually become circles when we draw them without any thickness here, because then it's just two line caps that are going to be together. Save and refresh, and we get something like this. Now the spacing here is 100 between them, so they are touching each other, but we can have larger spacing between them. And you see here at the end where they start to generate and end, the circles might overlap. This is not perfect here. We need to do a little bit of math and figure out what should the spacing be, really. So here's how I like to think about it. I'm going to say that the spacing is equal to 2 pi times this outer radius. And now we divide by how many petals we want to have. So let's say we want 2 here. And now I'm going to take this spacing and put it here instead of 100. Save and refresh. And we are getting 2 of them on the outside. And if you replace this 2 with 3 here, you're going to get 3 of them. And if you replace this with a 6, for example, there will be 6 of them there. Of course, this hard-coded value here would make sense as a parameter. So maybe petal count is equal to 6, like this. And let's plug it in here. Now, if we want to draw another one of these shapes next to it, then I'm going to really benefit from extracting this as a function. So these are going to be parameters, basically, and our function draw flower, since those are petals, let's call this a flower, is going to have those values as parameters here. The center x, center y, inner radius, outer radius, petal radius, and the petal count. And now all this code that we have here is going to work with the given parameters from the top. So we actually don't need these values up here anymore. We can just call now draw flower and specify here the center x, which would be half the canvas width divided by 2, half the canvas height, then the inner radius, outer radius, petal radius, let's set this one to 100 now, then petal count, and this should work. Let's try it. I'm going to save this, refresh, and here is what we get. And there is one thing that we could do to make this even clearer to read, because now again we don't know what is this value, and so many radii here, we don't remember which is which, really. So what is possible to do when your functions have so many parameters here is to wrap these inside of an object like this. So opening the curly brace and closing it here. And what we're doing here really is destructuring this object so that we get each individual attributes here. But now when calling this, we need to specify for each of them, like so, inside of the curly braces, that this is the center x, and then this is the center y, and then this is the inner radius, outer radius, petal radius, and then petal count, like this. So it looks like we are writing more things, and maybe this syntax is a little bit confusing until you get used to it. But now when you see draw flower here, you know what each of these different things are. And this function can be somewhere else, even in another file. So in that case, you need to go from one file to the other multiple times just to see what these mean. And now with this new code format, you don't have to. So let's see if it still works. Let's save and refresh, and it still looks like before. But now, because our code is separated in a function, we can call it again. Let's make this one smaller and move it to the left first. So I'm going to say here center x is going to be maybe minus 150. And now this inner radius, let's make it smaller, maybe 25. Outer radius 100. Then this petal radius, let's try 45. And see if there is space now for the other one. And it looks like there is. So I'm just going to copy this function call now below here, and let's move it to the right. So plus 150 here. And we have them side by side. But now it's time to change the properties here. So let's make this outer radius smaller to have those petals closer on the right. And then maybe the petal radius needs to be smaller so they don't intersect, something like 15. And let's see how this looks like. So already I see a difference here. Like this center circle is bigger on the right, even though we haven't changed the size. So inner radius is 25, inner radius is 25. But when I look at these, this one on the right looks bigger than this one on the left. It's amazing. And let's try to have more petals here. So maybe we put 8 petals there. I think the effect is similar, but maybe even a bit more large now with the extra circles there. What do you think? In some versions of this, the center circle has a different color. Let's try to do that as well. So I'm gonna set here CTX fill style to orange. I don't think this makes a big difference when I'm looking at it. But let's try also animating it. Like if we are increasing and decreasing the petal sizes, does it look like the center circle is changing in size even though it doesn't? So I'm going to keep just one flower now. And let's put it in the center here. And we need to start an animation loop. So animate, and now our animate function is going to first clear everything that is on the canvas, like this. And then it's going to do this draw flower here. And finally, it's going to call request animation frame animate. So this is going to call animate again and again and again. It's going to try to do it 60 times per second. And if we run now this code, like save the file and refresh the page, nothing happens, but actually a lot does happen. It just redraws it again and again and again many times. It only looks like it's standing still because these properties stay the same. So what we need to do is keep this inner radius static and animate the outer radius and the petal radius. And I'm going to say here lerp from 100 to say 50, and then with the parameter t. If you don't know what I'm doing, then I do have this video about linear interpolation where I explain everything in depth, but I will explain also here a little bit, so just a second. And then this petal radius here is also something that I want to change. So lerp from this 45 to 15, and again using parameter t here. So linear interpolation is a really simple function. It looks like this. Lerp a, b, and t, and it means that we're going to get a value between a and b, depending on this t. And this is going to be a value between 0 and 1, so a floating point number. When it's going to be 50%, it's going to be halfway between A and B, and 20% means 20% away from A and 80% away from B. So let's see how it looks like. We just say A plus the difference B minus A and multiplied by this t. And it's going to be our magic function here in this case. But we do need a value for this t. And I'm going to show you one way that we can get it. So I'm going to go up here and say t is going to be equal to new date, get time. And we're going to use the time to get the value. And this is going to give us the number of milliseconds that have passed since 1970, I think. And we divide this by 1000. Because in this way, we are going to get floating point numbers. And we're going to use these floating point numbers inside the periodical function. Like I like to use this sine function. So sine of this value, it's going to give us numbers between -1 and 1. And I don't want values between -1 and 0. So just between 0 and 1, as I mentioned previously, I want these to go between 150 and between 45 and 15. So a way to get just positive values, still between 0 and 1, is to multiply here, not multiply, but raise to the power 2. So any negative value multiplied by itself, it's going to give a positive value. So let's see what we get with these few modifications that we did here. Save and refresh. And now it looks like that. And I do see this middle circle changing. Like if I'm concentrating on it or on the petals on the outside, I have this impression that the circle is changing. What about you? Try different speeds, different sizes, different values for these parameters. Maybe try having them in parallel, 2 different flowers there. I think it's great to experiment with things like this, and the code we set up should allow you to do that really well. Thanks for watching, and see you guys.